Hey yo, what's up? So, I spent the last 5 minutes trying to figure out what exactly I want to talk about. Um, I figured out what I want to talk about, but I don't know how I want to approach it per se. So, yeah, we'll see how this one goes. Um, a risk, like taking on risk. Um, just that's the generality of what I'm, got going on in my head, I guess. Um, I guess kind of like figuring out when should you, when shouldn't you, the whys and the how, and all of those things. Which I mean, obviously it's case by case, right? So let's make sure we understand that first. But I'm gonna try to speak in a way that it's not too generalized, but I don't want it to be too specific either. So we'll see how this one goes. Okay. I want to I'm gonna specify type of risk because there's so many different types. Um, I think what I want to specify on is risk associated with your that I mean I guess career, but that which it whatever it is that you do, right? I mean, obviously, usually that's gonna entail some form of career, work, income, what have you, right? But not always, right? Yeah, that's what I want to talk about. And the primary reason why that's the thing, I suppose, is because one, there's some things I can relate to on that, and then two, I have a few people in my life who seem to be going through something associated with that type of risk, let's say. So yeah, cool. Hmm. Okay, I'll talk about a specific friend. Um, yeah, this friend, they are currently struggling in terms of their current employment and such. Like, I would say, it seems to be struggling quite heavily, right? Okay. And so I tried talking with them about it and figuring out, what exactly is it that's causing this stress, this pain, this anxiety, all of these negative emotions and feelings, right? Okay. And I told them, I said, ultimately, I was like, here's what I think, is what I said. I was like, here's what I think. Let me give some context. So, this job that they have is thus far in their point in their life has paid the most than they've ever gotten, right? I don't know exactly what is being made, but good money. Okay, nice, nice. Um, good experience, good learning opportunities, right? Definitely developing skill sets and knowledge and connections, things like that, right? Okay, cool. All right, cool. But again, now it's at a point where it's just too much and just a lot of bad. So okay, fine. Um, and so when narrowed down, we spoke for a while. I'm not trying to go into all the nitty gritty of what we talked about, but when narrowed down, it seemed like we concluded to some extent that the problem is this. Okay, so this is what I said to them, and they agreed, I suppose. But I was like, I think ultimately the problem here is that you could say that you are torturing your spirit in staying in this place. And the reason I said that was because the people with whom she works with, they they they're just not they're not people who have a similar way of being, let's say, than her, right? So they're if we're gonna specify negative, like she's a very positive type person, right? And it seems like the people she's surrounded by are not, and unfortunately she is not able to maintain that positivity around so much negativity. Again, that's just one aspect of it. There's more than that. But I was saying, it seems to me like you're torturing your spirit because, you know, I'm a believer that our spirits, let's say, we don't need to listen. It speaks to us. I kind of think the spirit is kind of like the consciousness to some extent. But in essence, though, you can torture it whenever you're doing something that you know you shouldn't have been doing or that is not good, but yet you keep doing it because, you know, for whatever reason. In this case, it could be because of the money, what have you, right? Okay, cool, fair enough. And so we were going back and forth, and, you know, she has good reasons for staying there as long as she has, and so forth. So the question really came down to, okay, so like, how long do you want to continue to torture your spirit, let's say, and what, in terms of no longer being here, one, what is the game plan, and then two, what is, like, regardless of the game plan, because anything can happen, right? Like, what is the worst that can happen if you ultimately just said, I'm out, right? And we hashed that out. I'm not going to go into those details and so forth, but this is what I think this is kind of the point I'm trying to get to with this. So that's what's going on with my friend. Okay, cool. So this friend of mine knows about this part of this aspect of myself that I'm about to talk about, and I related it, and I'll explain how in a second. But so I used to have a job. I've talked about it in other previous videos, but I used to have a job in which I was making, at this point in my life thus far, the most money I've been making, right? So, you know, I was making good money, you know, similar to hers job. A lot of learning opportunities, a lot of connection opportunities. It was, you know, you under what most would call a good job, right? One of those jobs. Okay, cool, nice. However, it got to the point as time passed that I realized that the higher powers, I would say, and the higher powers ultimately control how things play out within the company, right? I realized that the higher powers did not have the same morals as I. I don't want to go into all the nitty and gritty, but in essence, they just they were more focused on production, money, hitting the accounts and what have you, like money coming in. They were more focused on that than the serving of the people that we were supposed to serve, right? And, you know, I was able to, not right away, but fairly quickly, I would say, tell that, you know, they would play on the, we are helping people, this and that. And again, we were, but it was also a matter of like, but kind of without directly saying it, do what you gotta do to make money. Again, it wasn't directly stated like that, but it was very underhandedly said in some extents, in some ways, whatever. Anyways, but the point I'm getting at, you know, I was very observant of everything, and also I had my knowledge in the financial space and how taxes and things like that work, and so I was able to make the connection fairly quickly than most of like how this service that was being offered to clients could potentially have negative effects, some serious, down the line. And that was not something that was being trained and taught. And so, anywho, so I got to the point where I was realizing, okay, this is not good. It doesn't serve my purpose of serving people. Right now, I stayed because of the fact that I was in control of the people that I spoke with and worked with. And so I knew that I would not do anything wrong to harm the people that came to me. However, I couldn't control the people that came to other people that potentially would be willing to do, whether consciously or unconsciously, harm unto others. Okay, cool. So I didn't like that. So it got to the point finally where I decided to bounce. Peace. Well, I think most would probably say that was not a very smart thing of me to do the way I did it. Um, yeah, and I would agree. I would agree. Because I put in my 2 weeks. I was respectful because I like the people. Like, even again, the managers, I like them as individuals. I did. They were decent people. But how they ran business, not my thing, not my style. Can't do it. But I put in my 2 weeks and I left, and the first thing I did when I left was take I suppose, a vacation. But yeah, I went on a trip to Honduras, my home country, for 2 weeks because I haven't seen my family in 5 years and I miss them. And I just said, I'm gonna do this because, that's just what I decided to do. So boom, there we go. Mind you, I did not have a job prepared, but my mindset was, okay, well, while I'm in Honduras, I'll be looking for work. So hopefully I'll find something by the time I come back. And then two, I've saved up a decent amount, nothing crazy. But I saved up a decent amount to be able to maintain myself for a bit. Like, I think it was like no more than 2 months. So, in Honduras, I did look a little bit, but not as much as I should have. I was focusing on other things, what have you. Came back, no job. Cool. I was expecting work because I had two friends tell me that they'd be able to get me work, but long story short, that didn't end up happening. And so that first week I didn't do anything, assuming I was gonna find work, and then nope, that was wrong. I think it was like the first 2 weeks actually, which was stupid. It was dumb of me. Okay. Finally, I realized I need to find work. Oh snap! And so I started getting into the finding of the work, and that was a lot harder than I anticipated. I didn't realize the job market was so not good. So that happened. It took me a while. Finally find the job I have now, which I'm very happy with. And yeah, so okay, cool. In essence, I think that's all I need to say to get to the point I'm trying to get to. So I was telling my friend, who's trying to figure out what to do and should she stay, should she go, what is she gonna do if she goes, yada yada. I was like, look, like I told her, I was like, first of all, my advice and what I'm going to be saying in this video is not universal. So that's first and foremost. It's going to be case by case, different situations, different scenarios are going to be play out differently. So I'm making that clear. But I said this. I was like, look, I was like, what is, first of all, because there was two options. The first option was just leave now. Okay, that's one. The other option is, in her outside of work, find other, start looking for other work, which is not a bad option. That's not the option I took. But here was my reasoning. This is what I told this friend of mine. I was like, look, if that's what you're going to do, I think that is what you should do too. That's what I said. I was like, you should do that. However, if that is what you're going to do, this is my advice. It means during whatever period of time it takes for you to find something else, like line something up so that you can leave this, until that happens, no more, like, this is my advice, no more going out, no more downtime. Like, no, it's literally, you're going to work 9 to 6 or whatever it is that you work, and then you are going to work on finding work. Because what's going to happen ultimately is, you say, okay, well, it should only take me about a month. Sounds about right, I would say. However, it's going to take you a hell of a lot more than a month if you do other things on your spare time and, dilly-dally, which, again, most of us want to do. That's fair. But, again, how long do you want to torture your spirit? That's the question, right? How long do you want to torture your spirit? And so that's why I didn't do that, because I knew, because I had a 1 hour commute, this and that, whatever. I knew it would take me a hell of a long time for me to finally get to that point where I can pull the trigger, leave and find something else, and then leave and go to that other thing. So I just said, no, I'm just going to cut the cord, dive into the risk space of like not having a job and hoping that I'll find something, which was scary, but I'm good now, God bless. So here's what I was saying to her. I was like, look, man, like that's the thing I think you should do. Is stay with them, but don't waste time. But at the same time, let's say you don't do that. Let's say you cut the cord and do what I did, right? Well, the question becomes this: what is the worst that can happen? And everybody's gonna have their own answer, and some answers are a heck of a lot worse than others. That's for sure. But when I asked myself that question, here's what I realized, or not realized, but like said to myself, I suppose. Well, my expenses are low. I don't have a lot of expenses. I don't have kids, a lady. I don't have any like my mother, but that's manageable, let's say. Okay. And then 3, the big one for me was I know my worth, right? Like I know that I am an individual who I don't want to sound I don't want to gas myself up, but I tell me what to do and I'll do it. If I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out. And once I figure it out, I'll be damn good at it. I'll be efficient. I am whatever. So that's how I know that for myself. Whether or not anybody else knows that, that's a different story. Now, what I need to do is make sure that I'm able to not just communicate, but demonstrate to whoever it is that I would like to have hire me that, right? Like, and I know that I'm pretty good at communicating that. Right? Okay, cool. So those were the 3 things that I was saying to her. I was like, look, what's the worst? What responsibilities and, expenses and all of that, like put that into calculation. And 3, how confident are you in yourself and your ability to pitch yourself? Because that's what you do when you look for work. You're literally telling an employer you want to hire me. That's how that works. I will serve you, you will serve me. I will give you work and make sure your business does good and whatever responsibilities you put on me. In return, you give me money. Cool. Sounds like a deal. Right? Okay. So I was telling her, I'm like, look, ultimately, here's the point. Yeah, here's the point. When it comes to risk and things like that are associated with work and stuff like that, I think it narrows down to 1, I would say, and again, easier said than done in some cases, maybe even many cases, but what have you. I would say that if you are torturing your spirit, whatever that means to you, right? Like to some extent, I would think that all of us have some type of an idea of what that would mean, right? Okay, cool. So if you are torturing your spirit and whatever it is that you are doing, you need to find a way to stop doing that sooner rather than later. And the next thing is how and to what extent, right? So again, if you have kids, if you have a wife, if you have like serious responsibility towards your parents and such, don't just jump out of your work and dive into not having anything. That's dumb. I was able to do that because of my circumstances, but not everybody should do that. That's no. But I would then say what I said to her, which was, look, like if this is actually something that's really painful, that you really know it's not meant for you, then you need to find something else, right? You need to prioritize that. So that means, again, like I spoke about this in a different video. So you need to make some sacrifices, no more coming home and cracking a beer and watching your game. No, you have shit to do. No more hanging out with friends after work because you had a long day. No, you have shit to do. If it's that important. That's the thing we need to ask ourselves. How important is this? Because if it's important enough, you'll make those sacrifices. If it's not, okay, do you? Do whatever. It ain't my life, right? And so, in essence, I guess the moral of this video, I suppose, is one, again, don't allow your soul to be tortured continuously for long periods of time, more than it needs to be. Yeah, don't do that. Or do and suffer the consequences that come from that, whatever that might be. But obviously that's not wise. And then two, put in the work to save your spirit, right? Like, again, it's one of those things where it's like, sacrifice is scary because you just don't know what you can, like, again, I'm saying sacrificing the short term, right? Like, sacrificing the short term is scary because you just don't know anything about the long term. It's not guaranteed, potentially, right? Again, I disagree with that, but to each their own. But even though it's scary, I want to believe, at least for myself, I know this is true, but I want to believe for everybody too, to some extent, innately, we know that it is, I would say, necessary, or yeah, well, I would say necessary, but also we know that in doing that, there's a better chance of us getting whatever outcome we want. So again, if that's to save the spirit and do something that you actually desire to do, yeah, sacrificing the short term, you have a more likely chance, I would say, and I hope that most of us would agree to some extent, of being able to do that if you sacrifice the short term, whatever that entails, whatever that means. Everybody's different, right? And so, yeah, ultimately, just stop torturing your spirit, figure it out, put in the work, make the sacrifices, and then just ask yourself again, like, how important is it, and to what extent am I able to take on whatever the risk may be. So the risk can either be just cutting string and jumping out and not having work and finding something else and just figuring it out, right? Which is, again, not for everybody. Or the risk is making that sacrifice and putting in that work, hoping and praying that you ultimately get the outcome you desire. So those are the risks. And it's just a matter of deciding. Is it worth it to you or to others in your world who are important to you, or not? So, I don't know. That's all I got. Hopefully it was hopefully it was useful to somebody to some extent. So, anyways, thank you. God bless.